How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. What neighborhood was it in? I don't know. Where's the house? I don't know. Upstairs, downstairs, where was it? I don't know. But I had one beer. That's the only thing I remember.
Well, good morning and welcome to AM Joy live from Washington, D.C. Well, we are now 31 days until Election Day and just hours from the final confirmation vote for Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court. Over the course of this week, the men and all but one of the women of the Republican Party delivered an unambiguous message to American women. No amount of anguish, no testimony, no matter how credible, in short, nothing will stand in the way of the ambitions of a powerful conservative man. Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell made it clear that no matter what emerged, they fully intend to place on the Supreme Court a nominee accused of lying to Congress repeatedly and who stands credibly accused of sexual assault. Dr. Blasey Ford also made history by coming forward to testify that Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her in the early 1980s. The accusation sparked a chaotic confirmation process that included more accusers coming forward and dozens of potential witnesses who were not interviewed during what many are calling a sham FBI investigation designed to provide cover to Republicans like Senator Susan Collins, who announced on Friday what Americans should have known from the beginning, that she will vote in lockstep with her party to confirm Kavanaugh to the court. She'll be joined by one Democrat, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who now adds his name to the history books as having affirmed Mitch McConnell's strategy of packing the federal courts with conservative judges, shredding any pretense of civility in the Senate in an exercise of raw partisan power, and doing the bidding of Donald Trump, a president who is himself 19 times accused of sexual harassment and misconduct, and who scorns the Me Too movement by mocking sexual assault survivors at his rallies, and who we now know, full stop, is the perfect avatar for his political party.
When the noise fades, when the uncorroborated mud washes away, what's left is the distinguished nominee who stands before us.
The shameful intimidation tactics that have been employed as part of an orchestrated smear campaign.
You've humiliated this guy enough.
Why aren't you brave enough to talk to us and exchange it with us? Don't you wave your hand at me. I wave my hand at you.
When you grow up, Robinson.
When I grow up, we grow up. You and I grow up. How dare you talk to women that way? How dare you? That first, how dare you? That's right. You just whistle it out.
You gotta hold the door, ma'am. You're gonna get arrested.
Joining me now is Tiffany Cross of The Beat DC, MSNBC contributor Maria Teresa Kumar, Karine Jean-Pierre of MoveOn.org, and former State Department Senior Advisor Nayyera. Thank you all for being here. And Tiffany, I mean, it struck me this week that this was the week we found out that every Republican is Donald Trump.
Right.
Brett Kavanaugh is Donald Trump. The hysterics, the hyperpartisanship, the sense of entitlement.
Right.
He was basically channeling his best Donald Trump. And then one by one, each member of the Republican Senate did the same thing, disparaging the victims, disparaging women. I think at one point, Orrin Hatch telling sexual assault survivors confronting him, grow up.
Right.
They're all Donald Trump.
Right. So for people who think there's a moderate wing of the Democratic or the Republican Party, and then you hear people say, oh, we're trying to go after those swing voters, there is no such person. There's nothing that's going to penetrate this layer of willful ignorance from Donald Trump's hardcore base. But if nothing else, I will say the GOP knows how to manipulate their base. They know how to change the course of a narrative. And so instead of talking about the actual sexual assault that happened to Dr. Ford, instead of presenting her as a victim, they changed the narrative to make white men the aggrieved party in this country. How awful has America been and is currently being to these white men who are suffering from all of this? And so when he presented himself as this aggrieved father and husband, people related to that. They hooked onto that storyline, line and sinker, which runs contrary to facts and evidence, which a lot of people in the base, in the Republican base, have an allergy to. And And so when you had, even now, when you see the headlines that are coming off of this week, it's Trump celebrates a momentous week.
Yep.
And I'm not just talking about Fox News. These are headlines across multiple outlets.
Yep.
This is a week where this president openly mocked a survivor of sexual assault. The New York Times bombshell report that he benefited from outright tax fraud from his family. He said on a national stage that he fell in love with Kim Jong-un, a dictator who kills members of his own family, and yet the headline is he celebrates this momentous week. And with his Twitter feed juxtaposed with the headlines, his base will believe that and celebrate that, and they have a chorus echoing those falsehoods. And so we're seeing that play out, which is very scary.
No, and to your very point, let's listen to Lindsey Graham, because I think that's part of, Nayyera, what we saw this week is that Donald Trump's narrative, his own meta-narrative about himself, is that he is a victim, that everyone is out to get him, that his enemies need to suffer because of it. His base feeds into that, right, that their enemies are immigrants or Muslims or whoever it is at the time that they're aggrieved about. That is now what the Republican Party is. Donald Trump is not different from them. Here is somebody people used to think was different from them, which is Lindsey Graham. And Lindsey Graham basically made it very plain. Here is Lindsey Graham this week on September 28th talking about what makes him an aggrieved party in America.
I know I'm a single white male from South Carolina, and I'm told I should shut up, but I will not shut up if that's okay.
And there you go. And that has revved up the Republican base, that narrative.
And that's ultimately the fear they've had about the beauty of diversity. They have made it a negative versus an asset. The idea that you can have multiple voices at a table and they can inform with different perspectives and lead to better business decisions is not something that they're willing to be open to. I mean, ultimately, the Judiciary Committee has been led not just by men who look a certain way, but they're from a particular era. Yep. I mean, Orrin Hatch was in his 60s when he sat through the Anita Hill hearings. Yep. A lot has changed in the last 25 years of how we expect men and women to be relating to each other in the workplace. Orrin Hatch has not changed. Chuck Grassley was asked earlier this morning about why he thought there weren't enough women senators on the Judiciary Committee, and his answer was because they might not want to do the work. Yeah. It's actually really hard work.
Can we listen to that really quickly? I'm going to let you finish, but let's listen to Chuck Grassley. And this was on Friday. Chuck Grassley is asked why there are no women on the Senate, on the Republican side of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Here he is.
Do you have the sense now that you want to see a woman on the committee on the Republican side?
We can't do anything about that. You've got to have a desire to serve.
They just don't want to be on the committee?
Well, it's a lot of work. I mean, don't forget, compared to a lot of committee meetings, we have an executive every Thursday. So it's a lot of work. Maybe they don't want to do it.
I mean, what year is it? What era is it? What decade is it? And, of course, going to the Rupert Murdoch Wall Street Journal, Chuck Grassley walks it back, later clarifying he did not mean to imply women cannot handle the committee's workload, but rather it made it less appealing to senators of both genders. We have a hard time getting men on the committee, he said. Of course, you go to Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal.
I think that's exactly what he meant to say. And then some smart younger staffer was like, that's not going to play well, so let's go and fix that up. I mean, this goes to the broader, they may be representative of a certain population in their state, right? Chuck Grassley's from Iowa. So if you change the voting population of the state, you can change who is representing that state. But ultimately, they are not representing the broader cultural swath of America and how we feel about where we are culturally and where we want to be going socially.
And it's not just the men, it's the women too. Maria Teresa, I mean, can we talk about Susan Collins for a moment?
Let's talk about
Susan Collins and Jeff Flake have gotten a lot of ink from our profession, from the media, about supposedly being sort of mavericky and independent. I think that's never been true if you looked at their voting records. They tend to do sad tweets and say things on the floor of the Senate that sound like they don't like Donald Trump's manners. Right. But they obviously like him and they like what he's doing because they vote for it. Right? And so now you have Susan Collins. This was Susan Collins on Friday attempting to, in a 40-minute speech, empathize with the Me Too movement. Here's Susan Collins. This is cut 2.
Man or woman who makes a charge of sexual assault deserves to be heard and treated with respect. The Me Too movement is real. It matters, it is needed, and it is long overdue.
And yet, this is also Susan Collins, basically saying that Dr. Ford either lying about her claims or the little lady just was mistaken. Here she is.
4 witnesses she named could not corroborate any of the events. None of them called her the next day or ever to ask why she left. Not a single person has come forward to say that they were the one who drove her home.
Well,
can't be both.
It can't be both. One, first of all, and what she's trying to do is basically she recognizes that choice has been very important to her base up in Maine. So she basically says, I'm pro-woman. But you can't actually have this conversation and not actually interview all the witnesses that have come forward. So it's a complete sham. And I think what we're seeing is something on the political angle is that you actually have this new growing vision of what America looks like, but they're disproportionately living in the South. And you have the Midwest, who's basically kind of aging out and living in a different type of America, and they're really struggling with it. And the Republican Party, instead of being leaders and saying this is how we bring America forward, that there's a richness and diversity, they basically choose a president who is basically the poster boy of the white man aggrieved, even though he has nothing to be aggrieved of. He literally was raised with a silver spoon in his mouth. He inherited close to $4 million, if not that. He translated to $400 million with his inheritance. And the Republican Party, they're not curious at all of how to do it. But the fact that they're laying this vote solely on the feet of Flake and Susan Collins is amazing. I mean, Heller has a really contested race right now up in Nevada that he can lose because you have a growing Latino population, a growing young population who does not believe that what is happening is fair and just.
Yeah, a lot of people got a pass. Tim Scott is an African-American man in America. He should have been, I mean, no one was talking about whether or not he, needed to make a decision. There are other women who are Republicans in Iowa and other states. Why is it only on Jeff Flake, who's leaving, and Susan Collins? It is a good point. And I want to talk to you about what Move On is doing, Karine. But before we get to that, I just want to remind people that Susan Collins went along with Mitch McConnell's goal of not allowing President Obama to put anyone on the Supreme Court. She went along with that. And she also took the other side. She's now talking about due process. 40 minutes of why we need to give due process rights to an elite guy like Kavanaugh. But this was her attitude when it came to due process for Al Franken, the Democratic senator from Minnesota. Listen.
I did find the allegations against him to be both credible, disgusting, and appalling and degrading to women.
Can we just remind people that Senator Al Franken was accused of doing that photo, that ridiculous photo, and some other women who said that he hugged them too tightly when taking photos. Kavanaugh is accused of sexual assault. But Ms. Collins, Senator Collins, found the allegations against Senator Franken totally credible. But she can't find any credibility whatsoever in what Dr. Ford had to say. Your thoughts?
I actually believe that Susan Collins always was going to vote for Brett Kavanaugh.
Agreed.
I don't think there was ever a situation where she was not going to. There were reports that one of the reasons Brett Kavanaugh was chosen was because she had kind of okayed it, so they moved forward with Brett Kavanaugh. And so I think that she, in some ways, yes, she got played, but she was there all along. And we did Move On. You were talking about Move On. We did everything that we could with our other allies to make sure we try to hold her accountable, but she was always there. There was never, she was looking for cover. And so that's what the Republicans and Mitch McConnell gave her. And then that staging of the two Republican,
the silent women
behind her, it's totally staging. That's a whole Mitch McConnell thing. And so he gave her the floor. She was kind of like the end, that she was going to end the conversation there, and have the woman do it and talk for 40 minutes. But I just don't believe that she was ever going to vote no. I never thought she had a
45-minute speech ready to go.
Oh yeah, 45-minute speech. It was staged.
But I think this is also the party that basically let the Violence Against Women Act expire.
That's true.
Unknown.
Exactly.
So when we try to see what are the contrasts, where are the contrasts between the Republican and Democratic Party, it's increasingly a Republican Party that actually has no regard for women and their ability to feel safe at a very basic level.
And also feels that women don't have the right to ask for it. And even the women of the Republican Party say, you know what we're worried about is our sons, our sort of elite collegiate sons, but not our daughters.
But that has been the most amazing talking point. Even Kavanaugh said, if you have a son, I mean, if you look at the way Lindsey Graham is talking about it, the way they are phrasing it, they're actually trying to get women to say, well,
white college-educated women.
White college-educated. My son could also make a mistake at 17. This is just not fair.
And this is a longer-term failure of the Democratic Party. Has been not focusing on the judiciary as something to educate their base on and the impact that it'll have long-term, even though the judiciary has been responsible for many of the gains in the Democratic Party. Civil Rights Act was entirely because of legislation and overturning of various Supreme Court decisions. But the Republicans for a long time have rallied their base around federal judges. It seems, and Supreme Court judges, and making local elections of a member of Congress or senator matter, and connecting it to the Supreme Court. There's a ton of money they put behind it, and now Democrats, this is our awakening moment.
And they've done it for
stacking,
decades.
right? But right now they are stacking the courts with really young,
all the way down,
the lower courts with younger, inexperienced judges, but that share their ideology.
And that's why Donald Trump won, because of the courts pick, and they knew they were gonna have that.
And if you think about it, I mean, the Republicans think long term. They think decades.
They do,
and they say we don't have cultural power. So we don't. We even putting aside presidential power, they want cultural power. They want the courts for 40 years. Democrats are so fixated on the White House for 4.
And gerrymandering. I mean, that's a huge case that's going to come before this court. It's going to be on the court's docket this next cycle, very likely. This is something that Republicans are anticipating. This is somebody who will be able to control the maps, our electoral maps, which matters. You talked about Tim Scott, an African American in the Senate. You can take away the sexual assault charge and just look at this justice, his record on race, the things that he said. He's made jokes about Asian women in his emails. He's been vehemently against affirmative action. So you can actually take all this off and look at his partisan temper tantrum that he threw and say this is not somebody who's qualified to serve on the highest court of the land.
And if we think about the fact that the new Kennedy, the supposed moderate Justice John Roberts, is the guy who essentially presided over taking away and gutting the Voting Rights Act. What more could a Brett Kavanaugh, who is an extreme partisan, and admitted open, he wrote a speech that said, I am a Republican partisan. He's going on the Supreme Court. Tiffany, Maria Teresa, and Karine are going to be back with us. Nayyera, thank you very much. And I love the wife.